Hello everyone, welcome to my patch 7.6 rundown. This is a bit of a shorter patch than the previous ones. This should be pretty quick. Also worth noting there was a hotfix that's just relisted here. And so with that in mind, let's get into it. 7.6 does not seem to be very much a pro-aimed patch. It seems basically that it's for solo queue. And it's got a lot of buffs, so let's get into it. Up first, of course, Galio rework is coming in. The Galio rework looks pretty sweet. The goal is still for him to be a mid laner, from what I understand. But basically, he is half battle mage. You know, like kind of Galio was before, where he kind of runs in and does a bunch of damage and casts the spells. And he's also half warden, which is like a... Wait, is it warden or vanguard? I forget. Either way, he's also half tank, which of course Galio was already. But basically, he's got a lot of crowd control. He's really cool. If you want to see what he does, watch the Champion Spotlight. Otherwise, I think this champion is pretty good. I think he's totally playable. I think he's overall a pretty sweet dude. And let me move my webcam down so it's less awkward. We're going to be right here. Great. Let's continue on. Yeah, I think Galio's going to be really interesting. I think people will have to learn how to play him over time, and we'll see what happens with him. All right, next up, Aatrox. So Aatrox has two things going on. He has some buffs, and he has the hotfixes that came out right after 7.5 listed as well. Okay, so the actual buffs, okay, there's a name change, whatever. He gets full Bloodwell back after reviving. Keep in mind that reviving needs a full Bloodwell in the first place, and it has a cooldown, though that cooldown is now shorter compared to 7.4. But now he comes back up and has full Bloodwell again. So just if you're getting that passive off, which is a few times a game, you're going to have more stats when you revive, which gives you a greater chance of fighting your way back out of it, which I think is very cool. So that's a nice buff. I actually really like this. Also, apparently, it doesn't forget your W tracking, so that's also a small buff, and then some tooltip buffs. So, like, these are very small buffs, but they do matter. Like, this does exist, and it will affect your games to some degree. It is worth pointing out, by the way, that there was already a hotfix that went live, that it turned out the initial changes were giant nerfs. I didn't properly assess that, so I was wrong saying that they'd be buffs. But after these changes, now he is roughly as strong to slightly stronger. Base HP is obviously useful. Of course, you're never going to max Dark Flight, so now he's just faster at all times. 3 seconds off the base cooldown is a really big deal. You almost never actually reach level 18, so it's just always better. Even at 18, it's better, of course, as well. And then his blood price damage went back up. And just to quickly clarify on this tracks kind of how Aatrox has been doing. And you can see that his top lane win rate for the entire patch is 48%. That includes the early games that are not part of this graph right here. And you can see that he's winning, you know, his play rate's kind of low, so it's very spiky how his win rate goes up and down. But you can see he's kind of sitting around the high 40s, which means he's generally ended up in a pretty good spot, and the extra buffs should push him up a little bit higher. So, looks like Aatrox is going to be generally fine. I feel like Aatrox, by the way, is going to be a totally playable champion. I think he is a very weak jungler. I do not think Aatrox is a good jungler, but he does appear to be a playable top laner. So that's what I think Aatrox is now. These buffs, these hotfixes help that happen. Chogath gets round 2 of changes. He got oh, actually, I forgot something. I have a graph. I have a chart. This just explains how big the W buffs were. This was the old W damage. Forget the 61, 63. Just it's 60 to 200. This is the W damage at 7.5. This is the W damage in the hotfix / what's listed here. Worth pointing out that the damage difference on the base damage is now 3/4 to 90%, when it was 50 to 75%. Again, these changes already went live, so it's not like this is now going to affect the way you play the champion. These already went in, but I made a graph and I wanted to show it, or I made a chart and I wanted to show it, so we have. Great. Life is wonderful. Let's move on. Chogath has some changes, very small. You can stack one more ulti stack off of minions and off of small monsters. So if you're not getting kills, you're up to 6 stacks, and you're getting a little bit more HP per stack. It's very minor. Honestly, Chogath seems somewhat reasonable. He's still losing a fair bit. It's why he's getting straight buffs. You can see, again, play rate is so small, you're having like random spikes in win-loss. But he's kind of, sitting pretty consistently around the low to mid-70s, right? So he does need buffs. It's totally worthwhile to give him some stronger points. And so we just kind of quickly show, this was what he was way back in the day. This is what he was in 7.4. This is what he is in 7.6. It kind of halves the impact of these changes, basically. It's only 20 less per stack, and again, you can get more stacks, so hey, he's a little bit stronger. That's nice. I'm sure it is. Very, very minor, though. Just wanted to kind of show and illustrate exactly how much things got better. All right, so Fiddlesticks is an interesting champion because no one except Fiddlesticks mains plays Fiddlesticks. And Fiddlestick has been kind of weird in the jungle. So he gets a Terrify range increase. This is really nice because Terrify is a very, very short-ranged ability. This actually means more than I think people are going to give it credit for. You're much more likely to land a Terrify after landing a Crowstorm. You are able to, Terrify people off you from farther away. You don't have to let them hit you with things. You're much more likely to be able to trade spells with people instead of them getting hit you and you can't hit back. This is actually a pretty big deal. This is quite nice. Also, this is a very big change, I think, is that Drain can be cast twice, well, essentially. So, if Drain's target dies before the channel completes, the remaining duration is applied as cooldown reduction. I actually want to show you how nutty that is, by the way. So, ability ranks 1 through 5. Why is it zooming out? That's weird. Whatever. Ability ranks 1 through 5. Here's the base cooldown, which is 4 to 3. By the way, Drain lasts 5 seconds. I'm almost certain it's 5 seconds. I looked it up earlier, and then I forgot. But it's 5 or 6. And you get whatever's remaining off the duration of the up to 5 seconds channel off the cooldown. So if you kill something with the first second of Drain, you get the entire cooldown back and can restart it. Worth pointing out, at 40% CDR, this base cooldown is very, very short. Which means basically if you're getting to max cooldown reduction, which I'm not saying is normal for Fiddlesticks, but between this and that is your real CDR level, you can do like a 3-second kill and it's instantly back up from cooldown. Now, what's worth pointing out, the Drain has a very large mana cost, and that draining individual small raptors, then changing the next one, is not going to work well for you. It's not really going to work the way you want it to. You're going to run out of mana really fast. But the levels of cooldown reduction you can get and the ability to actually reset your Drain is somewhat high. So you'll actually get something kind of decent out of this, I feel. Worth pointing out that he was actually interestingly winning a fair bit in mid lane, 51%, but he was a bit weak in the jungle role. And honestly, again, kind of the only people playing Fiddlesticks are Fiddlesticks mains. But, I think he was deserving of some buffs because he's basically a heavily mained champion and still only 50%, which is generally a bit weak. All right, Gnar also has some buffs. Now, these look like changes, but they are generally buffs. Okay, so there's big changes to his health regen in the mini form, health regen growth in mini form, and then health regen and growth in big form. Okay, and Mega Gnar's crunch. You can now Q spells off it, so you can E into R very easily. That's just a straight buff. It's just easier to land your combos, so that's a big deal, actually. This is a very big deal. What does this mean? Well, it basically just means that it averaged the stats between his old HP 5 and his new HP 5 and his large form of the old version. So level 1 through 18, his actual stat growth, you can see 2.5, 6.5, in the middle is 4.5. So he's always got this roll right here. He's always got this when it used to be either that or this down the line. And it's always halfway between, it's literally halfway between each of those forms. It's worth pointing out that I am almost certain that Gnar was in mini form much more often than mega form, which means this is a net buff. The fact that it's always in the middle means in the long run, he is getting more health back. So it's a Gnar buff. It's a Gnar buff mostly to his landing phase, I would say, just because you're getting like 2 more HP 5 at level 1. And that's kind of big, and you're going to take a long time to transform at early levels like this, right? At certain points, it's more than double, right? By the time you're level 2, you have double the base health regen in mini form. So it is a pretty substantial change, I really do think. And overall, Gnar was a bit weak. 46% win rate's quite low. He did get better with new Fervor. He arguably got better with new Black Cleaver. But the champion is honestly pretty weak, so some buffs, some bufferonis. All right, next up, Misfortune. For those who don't remember, in 7.5, there were some pretty significant changes to Misfortune Q. It no longer did bonus damage on bounce. It could crit potentially, but it didn't do bonus damage inherently. But it did automatically crit if you got a killing blow to bounce. So, That nerfed Misfortune by quite a lot, so she got some buffs back up. And the base damage went up from 0 to 20. The total AD ratio went up by 0.15, which, by the way, also increases the base damage because total AD ratio is a thing. Her base AD is low, but it still matters. And then some minor quality of life things. She no longer briefly pauses. Her Q range increases with rapid fire cannon, which is nice, and no longer pauses on E. Okay. And overall, as a champion, she was, I guess, slightly weak. I think the champion was fine. I don't think she heavily needed buffs, but she's getting small ones anyway. And so I made 3 charts. Okay, let's talk about this. Let's talk about methodology. What I did here is I looked at the numbers from 7.4, numbers from 7.5, and the numbers from 7.6. I also included love tap because almost any time you use Q, it is going to apply love tap. And I think that's actually honest to look at love tap when comparing numbers and values and percentages, because I think that's actually honest to what the ability actually does, which is hit you with the bullet and apply love tap. I also, methodology-wise, use simply her base stats with the ferocity tree mastery that gives you flat AD and scaling AD, and assumed a Doran's Blade. I otherwise did not assume any items. It's Doran's Blade, masteries, oh, and runes, I believe, are also included. Doran's Blade, runes, masteries, no other items, so that this counts what you're doing at level 1, and it's fair for level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 until your first recall, and then from there, use your imagination for the AD ratio. Okay? Let's get into it. 7.4 and 7.5, of course, the damage didn't change at all. In 7.6, it went up because of the 0.15 AD ratio increase. And of course, by later game, the base damage went up as well. So you're seeing that your first hit Q is doing about 10% to 13% more damage. And in fact, keep in mind, there's still this 0.15 AD ratio. So it's doing 10 to 15% more damage. Misfortune Q does 10 to 15% more damage now to its first target. That's a straight buff, by the way. This didn't exist before. 7.4 to 7.5 to 7.6. Now it's a straight buff. And that's counting love tap. It's 10% more even after love tap is rolled in. Okay, so that's a buff. Okay, let's talk about the fact that the bounce hit got changed. Of course, in 7.4, it had a 1.0 AD ratio. It had some damage scaling onto it. 7.5, a lot of that went down. And 7.6, a lot of it came back. Well, it's worth pointing out that a bounce hit now has the same ratio it used to. It's got the same love tap damage it used to. And the actual damage on a simple Q onto a minion then bounce is 80 to 85% as much damage. And keep in mind, the ratio is unchanged. This actually goes closer to 100% in a real game when you're actually buying things. But it will always be weaker. To be fair, the base damage is always lower. The ratio can't be higher, so it is weaker. But it's 80% as strong when it was, I mean, you can see kind of this was 107 damage instead of 117, 240 instead of 279. At a certain point, this nerf got softened, but it is weaker if you're not killing the target. But there's another buff. If you kill the target, here's the damage you're doing. Okay? Zoom out one right here. 7.4, 7.5, 7.6. Because the AD ratio got higher, and we're rolling in all that damage with the runes and masteries, and because the base damage goes up with rank, this is the damage just with Doran's Blade, runes, and masteries. You can see it's buffed in the early game because of the AD ratio increase, and it's never going to actually be worse because of this AD ratio here. So now, Misfortune in 7.6, if you kill the target, it does more damage. The initial target takes more damage, and it's only weaker if you fail to kill the initial target. I think this ends up being overall power neutral to 7.4 and maybe power positive. The thing is, you usually got these hits off, right? This was fairly common to just shoot off a castman and hit the guy for some damage. But remember, you're more likely to get a killing blow because his damage is up. And the killing blows do more damage because the damage and the ratio are up. So the only nerf is in the unkilled double up, and everywhere else is a buff. So if you weren't doing unkilled double ups, you're just stronger than 7.4. And from my experiences playing Misfortune, which is only a dozen times this year, you did do a fair bit of this. Like this happened a fair bit. The unkilled bounces happened a fair bit. And support Misfortune was getting even more frequently the unkilled bounces. But this is what it lives at right now. That's the world we live in here. So let's move back in. And these are just very small buffs to just how she's actually going to play. So technically this makes her stronger on its own. If I had to guess, I mean, it's definitely a buff to Misfortune. I mean, this is a straight buff, but she'll be back up to insanely strong again, I'm pretty sure. Orianna has a very small change. Command Protect now falls on the ground instead of snapping back to Orianna when her target dies. This is a very large buff, I think. I think it is a large buff to Misfortune. I think specifically in pro play, where you're putting the ball on your initiator. Sometimes the initiator died, but now the ball is on the ground, which makes it much easier to land the shockwave you care about. Actually means quite a bit. It's very small. She's already a playable champion, but this is a Misfortune, or an Orianna. Although it fixes a bug with Orianna E, where the ball could disappear. Okay, so Quinn's getting nerfs / changes. Okay, so let's talk about the fact that Quinn wins a lot of games. She's not a great bot laner. She's not a great jungler. 51% win rate in the mid lane, 50.7% win rate in the top lane. Ban rate actually reasonably high. Pick rate's kind of low, but this champion is actually, you can see from this sort of win rate graph, has actually generally been pretty bonkers as a champion. Quinn has been a pretty insane top laner. To be honest, just like she has been winning a lot of games. Not literally the most egregious champion in League of Legends, but honestly a bit overpowered. And the main change is basically that her assassination is not quite as insane. It takes her a longer time to kill you. Okay, so her W gains more attack speed based on W rank. Of course, she maxed it last, I'm pretty sure. But it does gain more attack speed. And the total AD ratio of her ultimate goes down. Also, you now spawn in R form, so you don't have to cast it when you respawn in the game, which is a nice buff. Okay. So let's talk about what this actually means. Well, we made a chart. This is how I think you should think about Quinn's W and R, okay? So, of course, she lost, once again, we'll go back to the changes. She lost 0.6 total AD ratio on her R. So when she goes in bird form and jumps on you with Vault, she lost a 0.6 total AD ratio, all right? No longer has 0.6 total AD ratio on the burst damage. That matters. Now, what this is how many extra attacks you're getting via the W passive. When you trigger the W, you shoot the marked target, you gain attack speed. At rank 1, it's the same. You get basically a quarter of an attack based on the duration of the buff and the amount of attack speed the buff has. You're going to get 1/4 of an auto attack back, which obviously doesn't make up for the 0.6 AD ratio. At rank 2, right, you're getting this back. And what's worth pointing out, by the way, is you used to get this, and now you get this, and so the buff in total extra attacks gained is this, right? At rank 2W, you're getting 0.13 extra attacks, meaning if you can trigger your passive, your W passive, 4 or 5 times, the attack speed makes up for the damage you lost. And as W gets ranked up, of course, you need to trigger it less times. But it's worth pointing out, you're only going to really get the R damage off once, but you're going to get your Q and E and the W passive off more than once, generally speaking. So if you're able to use the W attack speed, you're getting extra attacks, which are worth your total attack damage, of course, in this form. So multiple W hits. Once W is ranked up, eventually you'll be stronger. But generally speaking, it is a nerf, and the goal was for it to be a nerf. Varus. Varus has changes. They are strictly buffs. Basically what it is so in 7.5 there was a nerf that said your Q cooldown is now 4 seconds longer, but if you trigger Blight Stacks with Q, then the Q cooldown is reduced by 4 seconds times your CDR, because the initial cooldown is times your CDR, so the reduction is times your CDR. Now it's just 4 seconds flat. The cooldown refund is 4 seconds flat. And it's worth pointing out, by the way, that Varus is weak depending on how you play him. So what's interesting is if we look at like his item builds, for example, right? If you're going for a Yomu's sort of Manamune build, sub 50% win rate, 50% win rate, sub 50 win rate. Oh, I'm going for crit. I'm doing Essence Reaver Hurricane, above 50% win rate. Yomu's Edge of Night, 50% win rate. Oh, I'm going for the Blade, 60% win rate. Right? Like his crit builds are actually winning much more than his other builds. Like we can look at this first item, Yomu's Ghostblade, you lose a lot. Ruin King, 50%. Okay, this one's low, to be fair. It is. Manamune, low. Hurricane, 50%. Rageblade, 50%. Shiv, okay, that's just a bad starting item. Lethality, 50%. Infinite Edge, above 50. Or, this is 44. His crit builds were working better than his lethality builds. If you scroll down here, not looking at this, sorry. If you're looking at Keystone choices, for example, you're looking at Keystone Masteries. When he goes for the Deathfire Touch build, it's a 44% win rate. When you go for a Fervor build, it's a 48% win rate, right? His better builds were the Hurricane auto-attacking builds. But let's look at this. So I did some comparisons, and I said, okay, if you go for an Essence Reaver build, you have this chart. If you went for a Yomu's build with nothing else on it, you had this chart. And what it is here was the old base cooldown. The old base cooldown of the ability before it got nerfed, right? At 10 and 30% CDR were these numbers here. And at 7.5, of course, it got nerfed. At 7.5, it became this much longer cooldown. And at 7.5, of course, if you refunded the cooldown with landing a Q with Blight Stacks on, it went back to the old base cooldown. So it was only ever worse and sometimes equal, right? But if you're going for an Essence Reaver Hurricane build, if you're going for a auto attack high CDR build, you've now got this refunded cooldown here. And in fact, it can go high if you get to 40%, of course. But it's worth noting that you're right, that the base cooldown hasn't changed, it's still 14 seconds. But if you refund it, it's still 1 second or, yeah, here we go, another 1 second faster than it was before. You get a full second off your cooldown if you're playing in combat. 1.2 at all ranks. You're getting 1.2 seconds off the cooldown at all ranks. That's really big. That's really, really good. You're getting 1.2 seconds off your cooldowns. So if you're playing these in-combat forms of Varus, you've got a better cooldown than you did before, and it matters more at higher CDR levels, which doesn't really surprise anyone, but I wanted to specify. I think this continues to mean that the best Varus builds are Hurricane builds, and they almost definitely include Essence Reaver, because more CDR is more better on this champion, and yes, I did say more better. All right, Warlords Bloodlust. Okay, these changes, by the way, don't mean much. Lux got new VO. Magic damage only shields have a different color on them. Great. Warlords Bloodlust got a massive buff this patch. It doesn't look like it, but it is, and I have math to prove it to you. Okay. So the lifesteal was 1 to 50%. Levels 1 to 18. Now it's 3 to 40%. That doesn't seem like a massive buff. It is. Because instead of being a lifesteal, it restores health equal to total attack damage that does crit. What this means is it's lifesteal that ignores armor. This is massive. It's massive, because also keep in mind it starts out at 3 times the power. Now, it's worth pointing out, by the way, old Warlords Bloodlust did not scale linearly. It scaled at a power of 1.5. And if you assume that every 7th attack lifesteals you, this is the old lifesteal you got. New lifesteal, I didn't know the numbers, I didn't know the equation, so I just assumed that it scaled linearly. I don't know if that's true. It's probably not, but I don't know the formula. So this is going to be probably wrong in the middle. It's going to be correct at the top and correct at the bottom. So this is the column for the fake buff and nerf. This is, if it were just lifesteal, the buff or nerf value. Obviously higher in the early game. Probably not as good as I'm actually saying in the mid game, because it probably still is some kind of cubic function or squared function or something. And it's nerfed in the end game. However, I chose Varus with no runes as the target. I said, you know what? If you're Varus, you have this much armor. So let's multiply this. And it's actually, what's funny is he just has 823.2 armor. Like, it actually just lines up exactly. That's how the math works. But if you're hitting a Varus, someone with no armor runes, it's 20% stronger in the early game and 80% stronger in the late game. And of course, it's a higher number against tanks. If you're facing a Maokai or a Rammus, this number is like 300%. Right? So what this means is, the fact that your lifesteal from Warlords Bloodlust ignores armor makes it 20 to 80 to several 100% stronger than it was before. So at the worst possible case, which is hitting a Varus with no armor, you can see the old lifesteal value and the new lifesteal value. It goes from 0.07% to 0.5%. But at the end game, it's basically worth 10% lifesteal if you're only lifestealing every 7 attacks. This is a massive buff because you're getting 40% of your total attack damage. Right? When you're a 300 AD marksman with 80% crit chance and an infinity edge, when you're playing Caitlyn, you can legitimately heal for massive amounts of life. Now, it is worth pointing out that, again, it is not real lifesteal. I assume it does not apply to, like, Caitlyn Headshot. It doesn't apply to the Blade of the Ruin King's passive damage, and it probably doesn't even apply to Trinity Force. There are cases where this is not as good, I guess. But generally speaking, the people who are running Trinity Force and stuff weren't going Warlords anyway. This is real nice. Massive buff. As it stood right now in 7.5, Fervor of Battle was a much better keystone. That is no longer probably the case. Warlords is probably going to be better on a lot of these auto attackers. It was already better on someone like Vayne, so Vayne's going to keep using it. Again, worth pointing out that Vayne's Tumble will not trigger any extra lifesteal. It's just based off her AD, but it's probably still buffed enough that she wants to use it. And as someone in chat pointed out, you're right. Most bot laners do not end the game at level 18. They end the game around level 16. And the game's decided by that point anyway. So you're really looking at your level, 12, 13, 8. Those are numbers that matter more. So the fact that it starts higher means even more. All right, the next change I'm going to actually cover that actually matters, it's actually the last change that actually matters, is Red Brambleback. The red buff has less MR, and the numbers are here. Now, it's worth pointing out, by the way, that I don't remember actually how they respawn, but I have a chart, so who cares? Red buff's level and how much MR it had, how much MR it has. And this is how much damage a mage does, how much damage magic damage does to the camp thanks to the new changes. And it's basically 5-ish% more damage. Now, it's worth pointing out, by the way, they only spawn at level 2, so level 1 doesn't exist. Whatever. But in your first clear, your magic damage is 5% higher against the red buff. Now, it's worth pointing out that Hunter's Talisman does magic damage, so technically anyone who starts Talisman does more damage to it. There are certain points in time where the MR is exactly the same number, but generally speaking, mages clear red buff 5% faster. Nice. Thanks. Fiddlesticks got buffs as well, so hey, Fiddle's a bit stronger. Great. In-game options menu looks nicer. Nexus Siege rotating game modes coming in. Client update. Improvement in champ select. Matchup page is better in low spec mode. Ready checks faster. Champ selects faster. Clicking a summoner name recently played. We'll go to the profile. And you can right-click friends in the conversation panel to invite them to your game via their profile, respective their match. Great. In the conversation chat panel, instead of just in the friends list. That's nice. In NA, people are playing both queues. Let's see how many bug fixes matter here. Victors are used to fizzle on death. That's gone. If Yorick was actually building crit, his Q does more damage now. We listed this fix twice. Knight's Vow with Forbidden Idol is buffed. That's cute, I guess. Means almost nothing. There's apparently an animation cancel in Illaoi that's gone. Apparently there's a cooldown reset there. Okay, Anivia is slightly stronger because her Q used to override her better slows. There's an interface bug with Vladimir E that's gone. Apparently there was some incorrect slowing from the Fizz R, which I'm assuming is a buff, but I don't know. Ivan on Tree Line got nerfed because he used to get free vision. Weird bug with Nocturne got fixed. Obviously Charm is E. Riposte with Banshee's Veil is a better interaction. And then... not really bug fixes, just small updates. Epic skins adding into the game. Epic chromos adding into the game. We're beautiful. All right, that does it for the patch rundown. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Please leave me comments in chat, in the comments down below, in anywhere. Always love to take advice to how to improve these. Thanks for watching.